And welcome back, folks, to another episode of the Planet Mullins podcast. We have an established and esteemed colleague of mine from the Recording Academy, which, for those of you who don't know, is the Grammy Awards, who was very helpful to me when I went to India earlier this year. And she has a new album out and with some great players on there, too. So she's also coming to Denver. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. And please welcome everybody, Charu Suri.
Thank
Hello.
you. Hi, Rob. So nice to be here on your podcast. I'm grateful for you having me.
Well, it's got a lot of our mutual friends do this show. And I think my last one was Vito Grigoli. And he was
Loved
saying,
him.
well, and he was saying a lot of wonderful things about you. I haven't had a chance to meet him in person yet, but I'm really excited about meeting you this week because you're coming to Dazzle, you're coming into town Friday night, and then Saturday night you've got a gig with your trio at Dazzle.
I do. I'm playing November 9th at Dazzle with Joe Lastie from Preservation Hall, who I just played with last night in New Orleans,
Okay,
and my longtime bass player, Jay Brunka. We're going to bring my signature Raga jazz to Dazzle and to Denver for the first time.
cool, man. So for people that aren't aware of what Raga Jazz is, uh, can you just explain it? Like, is there a Cliff Notes version of that? Because I got a lot of questions.
Absolutely. So typically, jazz uses the Western scales as the basis for improvisation.
Hmm.
Most musicians, when they study music or when they're introduced to music, they learn the 12 tone Western scales, 12 notes up, 12 notes down.
Okay.
Ragas are modal scales that are found in India, and they can be 4 notes up, 5 notes down, 6 notes up, 3 notes down. There are over 500 ragas. So by using these very specific modal scales as the basis for the melody and harmony, you create a different sonic palette. And ragas is supposed to be played at a certain time of day, which is not necessarily the mindset of Western music. So
Definitely.
yeah, you wouldn't ever pick up a piece in G major and say, oh, that's supposed to be played in the afternoon or that's supposed to be played in the evening. But ragas are actually meant to be played at a certain, very specific time of day.
Okay.
So, yeah, some of them are so specific that I just wrote one called Bhagashri that's supposed to be played only from 9 p.m. to midnight.
Wow.
Obviously, in a concert program, you would play them whenever, but
Mm.
that's when they were originally intended. So I use those as a basis for my music.
Okay, then in listening to your album, um, it sounded to me like uh, because being a person that's also with a jazz piano trio and living through the amazing history of jazz piano trios over all the decades, it sounds to me like there's kind of a ECM, almost Keith Jarrett vibe in a couple of the pieces on your album. And then I noticed you had some pretty good sidemen. You had Steve Gadd on drums.
Yeah, to call Steve Gadd a sideman would be it would be ridiculous. Let's say he's the feature. Yeah, I mean it was an honor to work with Steve Gadd and John Patitucci on my last album, Rags and Ragas. It was really an honor of a lifetime, really.
Now, I know a lot of my viewers of my show that are musicians are their jaw just dropped when you said those two names. Um, and when I interviewed Kit Wakely, who I'm sure you know through the Recording Academy,
Yeah, Kit's lovely,
yeah,
dear
when
friend.
when he was on the show a few years ago, he had the London Philharmonic and he had Steve Vai on guitar or somebody like that. And I said, Kit, how do you get these people that their names are so huge, these worldwide stars? How do you get them to do your music? And he says, well, I just sent him an email.
That's what happened to me. I picked up the phone and I called Steve Gadd and I said, I just recorded with John Patitucci. I'd love you to play the drums on a couple of tracks. And he said, send them to me. And
Wow.
I And I did, and he said, of course, he had to listen to them first, and he did, and he said, "Yep, sign me up. I'll do 2 tracks." And I thought it was a dream. I actually, at one point, I'm just like, "This is God's playing a cruel joke on me." I'm gonna wake up and discover that wasn't reality.
Well, I think the hardest part for just most civilians out there, or novice musicians or aspirers, is being able to get Steve Gadd's phone number. That can't be easy.
Yeah, I think I mean, I was lucky because I worked with John Patitucci, and I was, John and Steve worked a lot together.
Hmm.
And John recorded in the same studio as Joe Lastie, and from Preservation Hall. So Joe's on most of the tracks, and there were a couple of tracks that were in a very unique time signature in 7/8
Hmm.
that we wanted Steve on. So I, made the contact, and the album's done so well. We charted all over the world, and we took it on the road. And I've been keeping Steve and his family updated too. Steve and his wife Carol are so supportive and lovely. So it's been an honor to know them.
That's so great, man. Well, having players like that to play on your stuff, what kind of, I know drummer friends of mine are going to want to know, like, what kind of charts did Steve Gadd ask for, or did he make his own when he just sent him the stuff, the MP3, and then he does his own, or how did that work?
Yeah, I think he just put his own groove in. I did send him the lead sheet, and I sent him the tracks. It was written in 7/8, and he took it in a big stately 7/4, which was actually amazing. So I got back a real groove, as opposed to predictable downbeats. So he really
Uh-huh.
he kicked it up a notch, and a lot of my drummer friends said that's just the very signature Steve Gadd move, and they said it was just so great because it's not so predictable with the set downbeats.
Right, right. Well, yeah,
It's a lot of syncopation, just beautiful.
he was always the guy, for the drummer lingo. He could do rhythmic displacement better than
Exactly.
anybody. And
Absolutely.
being a drummer myself, I studied a lot of the Steve Gadd stuff. I don't play drums on a lot of my stuff still, but I do take those rhythmic ideas, like on my recorded version of Take Five, which came out in 2021. We actually do a good portion of the song in 7/5.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
we've been doing that since the 80s. Although Brad Moldau came around about 5 years ago and claimed that he was the first to ever do that, but I haven't had a chance to, put poison in his coffee yet for claiming that, because I did it many decades earlier. So now tell me about is there a term? Is this called raga fusion? Is it called alternative jazz? Like, how does the Recording Academy classify your music?
I think it goes into alternative jazz.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably crossover jazz, but I call it raga jazz because that's really what it is.
Uh-huh.
And as I, build my work and my repertoire and my recorded repertoire, I'll probably experiment far more with jazzier harmonies because some of the harmonies are very classical in my earlier albums, and
Right.
I want to get more into the jazz part of raga jazz, and that's exciting to me because it's just still very new. This groundwork is very new.
I had, I think 10 or so years ago, I had an Indian musician studying with me, and she had moved from India to Los Angeles and was going to be playing in a trio with a tabla player, a sitar, and keyboard. And she said, I have no idea what chords to play because we don't have chords at
No,
all.
India is not a harmonic, and that's the thing. India is not a harmonic tradition, and it's a melodic tradition. So my I study ragas with the guru, and so when I played her my work, and I use those ragas to a T, like I really study the ragas and I
Uh,
sing them, and I try to really do justice to the ragas, and I play them with the harmonies She's like, I don't recognize them. And I'm like, okay, then I stopped playing the harmonies. And I said,
Uh-huh.
do you recognize it now? She said, yes, absolutely. So the thing is, the raga is actually transformed to a completely different thing
Uh-huh.
when you put a harmonic layer over it. And the thing is, in Indian music, you don't learn harmony. You learn
Right.
only melody and rhythm.
Right. Yeah. What I tried to put across as the main point with this student was the thinking in terms of the chords that go with certain modes, like the A harmonic minor, for example, A, B, C, D, E, F, G sharp, A, and then if the raga was based mostly around E as the root, then I would say, okay, you could play an E7 there and then to an F major. That's kind of like as they do in Spain,
Yeah.
in that culture, and in flamenco. And she was with me about 6 months, and the band was great. I mean, she sent me some stuff, but I've always I've always thought that part of why the Indian melodies are so intricate is because there's just all that focus put on the virtuosity that goes into playing those melodies. Because the
Oh
ornament,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Oh, absolutely. It's all percussion and melody. There's all of that is what it's so amazing. But when you put that with the layer of harmony, it becomes its own thing. And that's why when I go back and perform ragas to a lot of these um, very well schooled, musicians who
mm-hmm.
are well versed in Indian music, I get a little nervous. I'm always worried what they're gonna say. It's like, but the feedback's been amazing. Like I've had people who learn the raga since they were very young come up to me and said, "You've just taken it to a different demographic. You made it a cool thing. Ragas are cool."
Uh-huh.
Yeah, there's one girl who came up to me and said, "We never thought of ragas as cool until now, and now it's cool because it's
Wow.
jazzy." And I thought that was a fun compliment to receive.
Well, what was it that? How many albums have you done now?
I've done five.
Okay, so what? At what point did you just wake up one day and say, okay, I've studied all this music and I have, technique and everything. Now what do I want to do? I think I'll make a new genre called jazzy raga or something like it. When did you come up with that idea?
The crazy thing is, I never sought out to do this. This was how I thought about music and jazz. Like when I started my jazz journey, and I always say this, even I said that yesterday at Mahogany Jazz Hall, it's just 4 or 5 years old since I've been doing, jazz,
Hmm.
because I was a classical pianist and a classical musician. And when I started doing jazz, it was very hard for me to do, although I've composed some really nice songs in the songbook style and the more traditional jazzy style. This was how I thought about jazz. This was how my brain worked. This was how I naturally composed and put harmonies together, to the point where some people said, "You know what, we've heard fusion before, but this is honestly the first time we felt it was just so organic." And that was the truth. This is how I thought of jazz in my head.
Hmm.
And when I would play it for people, they would be like, Charu, that's really nice, but we've never heard anything like this before. We don't know what you're doing. And
Right.
then I realized, hmm, maybe this stuff really doesn't exist, what's in my head. So let me backtrack. Then I had to backtrack, figure out what was I doing? Why was I thinking like this? And I said, oh, because I'm thinking in ragas and jazz. Let me take one step back. So I actually had to work backwards. And then I realized what I was doing myself. I had to put it in concrete terms that people could understand.
Okay, so I think I understand what you mean. So if you had um, a raga that's basically an A minor, then let's say typically, what would the notes be for a raga that's an A minor?
So a minor scale, the raga that's closest to a harmonic minor scale. It depends if it's a natural minor or harmonic minor.
Let's say harmonic.
Harmonic minor, the closest raga is called Kirwani. It's an evening raga, and that's the basis for my raga number one, which is a synthesis of Kirwani and Bimpalas. But Kirwani is the raga that is almost identical to a harmonic minor scale. So that's the basis of that particular one. And that's easy to remember. The raga that's closest to a major scale is called Sankarabharnam. It's also called in the south it's called Sankarabharnam. And that I composed a piece using Sankarabharnam. And it's absolutely beautiful, but it's a dovetail of the major scale. The other ragas that have a parallel are more like church modes, like so raga Bhairavi has a flat second
Uh-huh.
that is similar to a Phrygian scale in the church modes.
Right.
And I use that in my piece Bhairavi Blues. So there's some ragas that have zero parallel to the Western world, like my namesake raga, Charu Suri. There's no scale in the world like that. It's very uniquely raga.
But it can still be played like it's not
Oh yeah,
impossible.
I've composed a melody and harmonies over it. In fact, it's one of my most downloaded tracks from my album. Everyone says they love raga Charu Suri. It's called French Quarter. And but when I play it, people say this is very unique because it's half major, half minor.
Mm-hmm.
And the parallel just doesn't exist in the Western world. So I find it fascinating. See, I grew up as a child playing Bach's preludes and fugues, 12
Right.
major, minor preludes and fugues. So now a colleague and I are talking about doing a raga version of preludes and fugues for
Uh-huh.
raga based because it doesn't exist. So when you start thinking, most people when they think of scales, they'll always ask me what scale is this raga in, and I'll be like, the question is backwards. It's like, what raga is it in? So you think of it as a scale, C minor. You have to ask, so what raga is it in? Is it a Kalyani, Bhairavi? So you have to think of ragas just as scales. They are their own scales, and they have different names.
Okay, but you can write all of them down. So if someone was
Yes,
studying those three things, then it would correspond to maybe a harmonic minor, and then it could be melodic
some of
minor
them.
descending.
Exactly,
And
some of them.
but in Indian music, are there more than 12 notes in every octave? Because that's the thing with the Chinese music is 22 notes an octave.
There are some, but because I'm composing for the piano, I don't use microtones.
Okay.
It's tonal. It's
Uh-huh.
tonal. I always say that it's minus tonal ragas. I don't use microtones because I'm a pianist.
Okay.
But there are microtones, yes. And because of that, there are over 500 ragas that exist. I mean, the cosmos is more than 10 times more than the Western.
Right. Well,
So it's like,
and strictly metaphysically, it's more than 300 trillion variations per octave when you look at everything metaphysically, because there are those times when, I mean, I was one of the first people to be super happy that they put pitch benders on MIDI keyboard controllers, because
wow.
I like to play those notes that are in between the piano keys, and that adds a whole nother dimension to it. So let's talk about your tour. You've been on tour for, I mean, ever since I've been seeing you playing in a new city kind of almost every other night for a year, 2 years, a long
Yeah,
time.
it's been so crazy. I have been on tour for a long time. I'm always on the road. Has been about a couple of intense years of touring. I've played everywhere from London to Italy to India. I just got back from New Orleans last night, and tomorrow I'm off to Arizona, and then I'm playing in Denver. And
Ah, yes,
it's
in Denver, where I'm going to host your show and I'll meet you for the first time.
That's amazing. I'm really excited to meet you in your hometown.
Well, I don't know how much of a hometown it is, but I did go to high school and college in Denver, and you know, I'm remembering back to earlier this year when we were talking on Facebook or something, and I reached out to you because I was going to Bangalore for my second tour over there with Hubert Laws, and he said, "Oh well, I know a bunch of people there, and my whole
Yeah.
family is from Bangalore." And then, you know, you were so gracious to introduce me to a few folks over there, and I want to go back there and get involved in the educational thing because
Yeah.
while you've been doing a lot more touring than I have, I've been putting together some really amazing educational programs that'll work kind of in any language, especially historical things about American music, which will be, I think, fun for everybody.
I think that would go over very well. Jazz is such a huge and hot topic right now in India. There's a beautiful new jazz club that Arjun Sagar just started called Piano Man El Deco, the place that you must play next time with Hubert. I know they would love to have you.
Cool.
And it opened up in Delhi, and I was very happy to play there. Herbie Hancock was just there a few months before I
You
was.
sent me a picture of that place. It's like a really open with the high ceilings and stuff.
Yeah, it has a
Oh
chandelier
man.
made up of like 500 trumpets or something like that.
Yeah, that place. I want to go there.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and it's in Delhi, and it just opened. It's like a brand new club.
Now, the other Indian person that I know through the Grammys, Ricky Cage, is somebody that I did get to meet Ricky in person last year because um, Hubert and I were doing this thing called the Central Avenue Jazz Festival. And it's always fun to play with Hubert. I wish we were playing more with him. He doesn't really need to tour anymore.
Yeah,
Um, you know, I mean, he's at the point where I think my guess is that he's just making so many royalties from all the sampling of his earlier stuff. And yeah, we haven't played that much this year, but there was a big Grammy party at the Evergreen Studios for the Ricky Cage Stuart Copeland project. And it was the same time as the Central Avenue Jazz thing. So it was fun to go over to Evergreen Studios. I hadn't been in there, and meeting Stuart Copeland was great. And then Ricky and I had talked because he's been on my podcast a bunch of times, and to just be there and stand next to him and meet him. He is a really tall guy.
he's a really tall guy, very generous, and
He's like
just an
six
amazing.
seven.
Yeah, yeah, he's a giant in every way. Just a lovely human being. Yeah, I'm very
Is,
honored to know him.
is he also from Bangalore? It seems like everyone cool is from Bangalore.
Yeah, he's from Bangalore. I am not from Bangalore. I grew up in Chennai.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Maybe you just said your family lived there,
Um,
or you
I
had some
have I
family.
have friends in Bangalore, and
Okay.
but I grew up in Chennai. I was born in Madurai. But yeah, Ricky is from Bangalore, I believe. Yes.
Okay. So have you guys ever talked about a collaboration, or are you kind of competitors, or because with his thing, he always seems like he never does a project that's just about the music. It's always about hunger or starvation or world peace or some other stuff, and he always ties a
Cause
cause to the music. And I've never been the guy that does that. Like for me, my music is just the music. I think that's enough. But
that's how I am. No, we haven't really talked about projects, although I've seen him all over the place. I think he's just got his hands full. He's very, very busy. Um, and yeah, maybe someday down the road. He's just wonderful. He's always so prolific and productive.
yeah, he does a lot of stuff. And when I first started getting his promo material, which must have been 10 or 12 years ago, all I could think of was, man, this guy has either like got his own diamond mine or the government is like giving him millions of dollars because he was sending this promo material that it wouldn't fit in any mailbox. It was so big in these parties, and then in his videos, there's like airplanes flying through the air, and he's like got drones and all this stuff. He's really quite the character. It was fun to meet him. So, okay, so is one show or two
I don't have
shows?
any of those. I don't
Ah,
have journals. I do all of my stuff myself. So
I don't know where Ricky gets his video budgets, but I, you know, I wonder if
they're
maybe
beautiful.
I wonder if maybe someday we could talk him into if we
You're
can.
on mute. I can't
No,
hear you.
oh, you can't hear me now? No, I'm here. Hello? I am not on mute.
Okay, it froze for a bit.
Okay. But maybe if we could get Ricky drinking some Indian beer, then, we could get him to explain to us why he's not a Bollywood star, because I think he would be great in Bollywood.
He probably will be one day.
All right, so coming up Saturday, November 9th, is it one show at Dazzle at 6:30?
Yeah, one show at Dazzle at 6:30. So whoever wants to hear Raga Jazz, please come out and see us. Tickets are on dazzle.com and on my website. So would love
Beautiful.
to meet you.
All right, well,
And,
I'm
and you
sorry.
get to meet Joe Lastie from Preservation Hall, who's quite the drummer.
Cool, man. And I always wrap up the shows with, do you have any advice for a younger artist, for the young people trying to get going and you're mentoring? What do you tell them?
Honestly, I'll say this is really the truth. There are no shortcuts to this, even though it sounds like an amazingly glamorous profession. I've been touring and playing since I was 7.
Wow.
What you don't see is the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours behind the scenes. Like literally hundreds of hours. And ever
Hmm.
since I was 5, I was practicing 6 to 8 hours a day. By the time I was 9, it was up to 8 to 10 hours a day.
Uh-huh.
No joke. And that was like on a bad day. And composing and producing quality records and getting the sound just right and getting all of the effects and the nuances just the way you want it to be, especially like case in point rags and ragas, which we all recorded in one setting. And we just did like a 4 or 5 hour session. Lonnie Park was there. He's amazing. I love Lonnie. Boom, we got it done. But the music was the product of years and years of simmering and
Right.
contemplation and rethinking. And even though most of my manuscripts I compose in one setting, I'm one of those people who just dash out a tune. It's not dashing out a tune. I've been thinking about that tune probably for months before that tune is just
Right.
dashed out.
Right.
And I will say that no matter how amazingly glamorous this whole profession sounds, it's serious work.
Mhm.
It's You have to work and you have to be in it because you truly, truly love and honor the music. There is no other way. There is really no shortcuts to this. And if you're in it for the glamour, for the awards, you're in the wrong business. That's the wrong mindset. So it's
Okay.
those are all byproducts, but so that would be the advice I would say. Really, really put your energies and efforts into the music.
Beautiful. Well, we're going to have to leave it there, but I'll have you on another time. And what a fantastic guest you are, and how honored I am to be your friend and your mutual appreciator of our two different types of piano music. And I'll look forward
Like
to meeting you here in a few days in Colorado. So that's going to do it, folks, for another episode of the show. Don't forget to check the description box for links to her music, and we'll hope as many of you as possible will come hear her wonderful trio this coming Saturday night.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Bye bye now.
Bye bye.